Might I be the first to welcome you back to reality? Today we are talking about our beloved novelist, Jane Austen. When you think of Jane Austen, you probably think of like, oh my gosh, I had to read Pride and Prejudice in high school and it was the worst. Now, I didn't have to read any Jane Austen in high school, so I wasn't scarred from that experience, but I was very much in the Jane Austen world when I was in high school. I felt like she just knew my little broken heart, and I feel like at the time I described her as the Taylor Swift of the Regency era. I feel like she knew how women functioned, she knew what they wanted, she knew how they worked, and she knew how to communicate it. Jane Austen is considered one of the greatest female novelists of like all time, and definitely one of the first. Before her time, writing novels was kind of seen as this like trashy, brain melting way to pass time. Like people read, obviously, like for fun even, but they didn't read fictional like fantasy novels. Not fantasy in the way that we think of them, but like fantastical storylines and things like that. And something that was cool was she took her time period, she took her social expectations, all these things that were true of her culture and time period, and she created these wonderful romance stories that women were excited to read, but they weren't trash. Like, they weren't smutty, sleeping around types of stories. They were very wholesome, but they were also really filled with these women who knew who they were, knew what they wanted, and were willing to fight for the things that they wanted. Now, Jane Austen herself, this is coming from, I'm doing a lot of, okay, I need to start doing makeup and then I'll keep talking. Today we're doing like a very fresh, clean-faced makeup routine. And this is not like my quick everyday makeup routine. This is totally different than that. This is like anything that looks effortless. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And the main thing with a fresh-faced, clean skincare makeup routine is skincare. So I've done quite a few extra things to prepare for this video. I've done this Origins Drink Up Intensive Overnight Mask. I actually did it 2 other times that I thought I was going to film this video and didn't end up filming, but it blew my mind. It was awesome. I have the little trial size here, but I totally want to get the full size. It smells great, it feels great, it's wonderful. Ooh, let's do this. And then I used this Grace and Stella Spray All Day Rose Spray. I did Dr. Brandt Needles No More Baggage for under my eyes, and then of course my moisturizer. But right now I'm also going to put this Glam Glow Nude Glow moisturizer on. It's an illuminating moisturizer, so I'm going to put that on all over my face, and then we'll put some other product on over top of it. So we're starting with this glow. Oh, this stuff smells great. My skin feels smooth and wonderful. So, and then we will layer product on top of this. So as I was saying, female novelists, not even like existent, but pretty frowned upon. I'm going to go in with my Milk Makeup Blur Stick to help my little pores look even smaller. And it's gonna mattify the center cheek area. Gonna just continue to work that into the skin, as the YouTubers say. Oh, I actually completely forget what I was saying before, but that's okay, because I'm just gonna keep talking about it and I'm sure we'll come to it. We are going to do not even like full foundation. I'm going to go in with some concealer in the places I normally would, so my cheeks, under my eyes, this area here, and then we'll add it to some extra places that need like these blemish spots. So let's start from the beginning. Jane Austen was born in 1775, in December of 1775, to a pretty like normal family. She had a junk ton of siblings, which isn't surprising at that time. Her dad was a clergyman, and so they were just having a lot of kids. But she grew up in a pretty, oh, I remember what I was saying. She grew up in a pretty sensible home. It was pretty middle class, so they weren't caught up in a lot of the like high class silliness when it came to like social expectations and like roles in society. And the reason I wanted to do a pretty clean, fresh face makeup look was because in this time period, this is facing some serious backlash against some of the French Revolution intense makeup aristocracy situation of the earlier in the 1700s. So where people were powdering their faces a lot, they were sleeping around, just like living these super crazy lavish lifestyles. And this period of time in England is kind of facing some of the repercussions of living like that. So the women didn't wear any makeup, because if you did, it was kind of seen as like scandalous. Like women of ill repute wore makeup, let's just say that, and didn't want to be associated with those kinds of things. Okay, so I'm going to take some concealer on the back of my hand, and then I'm going to go in with a smaller brush to deal with some of these other areas. So the reason I wanted to do minimal makeup was because Jane Austen herself wouldn't have worn any. So Jane herself wouldn't have worn any makeup. Her sisters wouldn't have worn any makeup. Let's brighten this under eye. Her mom wouldn't have worn any makeup. So really, no like upstanding woman in their social sphere would have worn makeup in this time. So that's why I went for more of a fresh-faced look. I was hoping not to have to do any bronzer, but this concealer color is light, so I might have to do some just to warm back up some of these areas. But also in that time period, fair skin would have been coveted, because that meant you weren't working outside. So in this time period, that would have been more what was desired, but that's not, we can't exactly recreate that because I do spend time outside. So my skin looks that way. And because we're going for a glowy look, I am going to be using, I was hoping not to use any powder products. Maybe I'll do this last then. So I'm trying to use mostly cream products for this video, which I think is going to be sweet. Let's go in and do some cheek color. I have lots of options. I have a ColourPop, Super Shock Shadow, and then I also have these like lipsticks and glosses. I think I'm gonna use this guy. It is a chubby stick crayon thing from Clinique, and I'm just gonna go right on the cheeks, and then we'll blend it out with, see, this is looking a little bit like French aristocracy that I was talking about before. So blending this out, really just want a light wash of color. You could also use really lightly liquid lipstick if you wanted to. If you wanted something that wasn't going to go anywhere. Okay, I'm not even talking about Jane Austen at this point. I have a lot to cover and my makeup's almost done. So here we go. As a woman who was not born into a high-class family, I'm going to do my brows because they wouldn't have plucked their brows. So we're going to go for bold brows. She would have not been working, but she would have been expected to marry well so that she obviously could support herself and her family, and whatever kids she might have had. And so the idea that she was a novelist was really kind of like bizarre in this time period, because most women who were novelists just kind of like dabbled in it for fun. They were like aristocracy who were like looking for hobbies. And she actually did get some novels published in her lifetime, which did provide some income. So that's kind of cool in itself that she was like one of the first women to have that happen. And fun fact about Jane Austen that is kind of bizarre, like you would assume that this wasn't the case, but she never got married. She had a couple of engagements that didn't quite go the way that she anticipated. I'm gonna go in with this ColourPop blush just to brighten up that color, and it's got some shimmer in it, but I wanted to add just a dash more color. I like that light wash of color that Clinique Chubby Stick gave me, but I wanted just a little bit more. Because she was from middle class though, she and her older sister Cassandra went on to get a little bit of further education, which is really unheard of in this time period for women to have gone on to further schooling. So that's really sweet that she and her sister got to do that. One of my favorite things about Jane Austen is that I'm going to go in with this highlighter because we want to get some of that glow back, is that she used her novels as like social commentaries to just her society at the time, much like many novelists do. But it's kind of funny, I just finished reading Northanger Abbey, which is in the middle of some of her novels that were published, and she basically makes fun of the Bronte sisters the entire time. It's kind of awesome, because the main character in that book loves these like more romantic, like more like gilded, and I don't mean romantic in like romance, I mean romantic in like the genre, like, so the Bronte sisters, so like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, where like all the emotions are like really visceral, and like he's got some lunatic wife locked in the tower, and he's this like brooding Byronic hero, those kinds of things. Jane was like, that's not real, it's kind of bizarre, and I'm gonna call it out. But she did use her novels to give voices to more feminist characters, which is pretty sweet. And things like when she was living in Bath, she was writing about Bath, you know, things like that, things of that sort. There was a long time that her family did not want her to be a published author. I am going in with this powder bronzer only to kind of blend out these lines between my concealer and my not as, and my more tanned skin. But it's a little bit shimmery, so it's going to keep that glow. So a lot of female novelists at the time were not super well respected. Like I said, they were kind of seen as like having published trash. And so her brother at one point was like super adamant about her not publishing because they had seen other female novelists just kind of like get dragged through the mud. I am going to take a little bit of gloss. This is a way that you can kind of help keep that glow. This is just like a random gloss that I found. It's pink, has some gold shimmeries in it. I'm not normally a face gloss person, but I'm feeling it today. That's nice on those high points. You gotta be careful because if it's if you're not sure how the gloss is gonna react with the makeup you've already put on, it could just like break it down chemically and could be quite the situation. It smells very interesting. The only thing to remember is that now you have something sticky on your face. As Jane did publish, even against her brother's will, he saw that she was respected in a way that these other female novelists were not. Another way you can achieve this more like glowy complexion is what I should have done, to be honest, was mixed this with my illuminated, what is this? What am I saying? Moisturizer. That would have kept the illumination in my skin while still getting the coverage. So do that at home. Or if you want a light all over coverage, take your normal foundation and mix it with your moisturizer. That'll make it into like a tinted moisturizer basically. So Jane Austen was really bold in expressing these more feminist desires and these kind of like challengings of the status quos in her novels. She was really bold in doing that because at this time, I mean, Britain was at war for most of her life. So at this time, any criticisms of the status quo or any like speaking out of certain traditions could have been considered disloyal and even dangerous. There's something I really love about Jane Austen that I'm going to take some mascara, that she was really able to recreate the world around her. Like when you read a Jane Austen novel, you're not, well, that's cute. She doesn't give you like a Diet Regency era. Like you have a really great picture of how things looked for them. Like we are not her contemporaries. And so there is a large gap between, I mean, there's a couple hundred years in between us and her novels. And so I love that people are still reading them. But there's certain understandings culturally that might not be explicitly written in her books that we as more modern readers have to educate ourselves on. I'm gonna put some highlighter under my brow bone. Because I really enjoy history and I immerse myself in it quite often, these are not things that I feel like I personally have to remind myself of every time. But if it's something that's new to you, I would highly encourage you to watch a documentary or find a way to kind of learn about the culture and expectations of people in the Regency era. A contemporary of Jane Austen named Richard Whately, I don't know how you say his name. He said, what made Jane Austen great was her accurate and unexaggerated delineation of events and characters. So we can expect that the picture she paints of her time period, social expectations, everything that has to do with all of that, is pretty accurate. I think it's funny, Charlotte Bronte is said to have found Jane Austen's novels unengaging. And I'm not surprised because the Bronte sisters novels were like so elaborate in their storylines and plots and backstories. I feel for emotional, like manufacturing of emotional engagement and responses, which like it's art, it's supposed to do that. But they approached novel writing so differently that it makes sense that they would feel strongly about each other's novels. Charlotte Bronte says, Miss Austen is a rather insensible woman. She may do her business of delineating the surface of lives of the genteel English people curiously well, but she ruffles her reader by nothing vehement, disturbs him by nothing profound. The passions are perfectly unknown to her. She thinks Jane really was like a plain Jane, even though Jane knew how to write. Jane Austen was not unaware of the things that she writes about. She was engaged once before, and then she had an actual romance with this guy named Tom Lefroy, who, I might be done. That feels kind of silly, doesn't it? Oh, I think I also hear a baby. Oh, my lips. My favorite chapstick of all time is this Vaseline Rosy Lips. It's got a little bit of a tint. I might add a little bit of this guy just to give us some color. And then I'm gonna put more of this on top. It lasts for hours and it feels so comfortable. And Jane also was no stranger to poverty. She and her family had to keep their finances very much on their radar, and she experienced times of little means and times of great means. So she was no stranger to these different spectrums of social classes. This article says that she did reveal her beliefs in her novels, not just about domestic life and relationships, the idea of like just marrying for money and her feminist ideas, but about the wider political and social issues of the day. And because of those dangers I was talking about before, and especially as being a woman, if she published some things that were scrutinized, she could not only lose her publication and lose her financial income, but she could be shunned socially. Oh my goodness, say that. Shunned socially, which in that time period would have been a really big deal. If she had lost all of her respectable connections, not only would that make certain possibilities of romance null, but even her friendships could have been really damaged. So her trick was not to be too explicit. She couldn't make herself too obvious. She basically, like, if a man were reading it and he wasn't woke, he might not pick up on the things that she was talking about. This article talks about how marriage at the time it mattered because it was the defining action of a woman's life. You see in her novels that they revolve about these women finding husbands, and I really don't think it's just women finding husbands. I have a lot more respect for them than that. Also, I'm married, so I love that I found a husband. And he works really hard so that I can stay home with our kids, so I'm not at all bashing that. To accept or refuse a proposal was almost the only decision that a woman could make for herself. The only sort of control she could exert in a world that must very often have seemed as if it were spiraling into turmoil. So a lot of these center around marriage because that was a really practical piece of a woman's life. If they had certain social friends, they could be invited to social balls where they might meet someone of a higher class that they could eventually marry. Like, in Pride and Prejudice, the fact that Lizzie turns down, I was going to say Colin Firth's proposal, Mr. Darcy's proposal at first, that would have been detrimental to her family's well-being if they had this potential and started dreaming about the potential of being financially stable for the rest of their lives and 4 other kids. That's one of the reasons why her mom freaks out, and then why they're so stoked at the end that they are actually getting married. Jane Austen compared herself to a miniature painter, that in her work, every stroke of the brush, every word, every character name, and every line of poetry quoted, and every location matters. So she's recreating these little villages where real life is happening, and other people get to be in on someone else's story. I love Jane Austen novels for lots and lots of reasons. Because I love history, I really love that they give us an accurate glimpse into what life was like for these people, even though they're fiction. When it talks about them getting dressed and not having a maid to help them. Like, we have an idea of what that looks like. Whereas, like, nowadays, nobody has that. Maybe Kim Kardashian or someone like that. But normal people do not. I also love that she was a famous authoress in a time where there weren't many, and she was a Christian, and she stood by those morals. I have this sweet little book that's called The Prayers of Jane Austen, and it's basically her journal entries while she's praying that were published, and they have these beautiful illustrations in them. I got this as a gift, and I'm so grateful that, I forget who gave it to me. I'm so grateful I have it. Also, it's beautiful. I hope you enjoyed that. There are a couple key elements to this kind of a look. Not overdoing it in terms of color. You want it fresh, clean, and healthy skin is obviously a really important foundation. I think this look is so pretty, where it's really clean, fair eyelids with bold lashes. I think that's lovely. But again, in this time period, they wouldn't have worn probably any makeup at all in this specific class and socioeconomic situation. One way that they help bring color to their face, they would pinch their cheeks and like bite their lips so that blood came to the surface, and obviously like made them more pink. You see that in, this is not at all the same genre, but in Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara looks into a mirror and pinches her cheeks, and so they look a little bit refreshed, which I think is kind of fun. And then dewy, glowy skin. So if I wanted to, I think I can spray this stuff over my makeup. I might. Let's see how it goes. And that just keeps things fresh and hydrated. I hope you enjoyed this. This is a little bit quicker video than I'm used to, which is kind of fun. And there's a lot that we can learn from Jane Austen and learn about her that we don't necessarily think would be that interesting, but I think it's very interesting. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope this was fun now this is not setting, but I hope this was fun in recreating this kind of fresh-faced, chic makeup look. I hope you enjoyed it.